are live. Hello. Welcome to another exciting stream. Let me get everything all ready. And get started on this latest page where Meritron finally shows up. Exciting stuff. Oh yeah, and I was going to drop frames 25%. Oh, great. Looks like we're going to be losing some frames again. What else is new? But I'm going to be listening to a UFO documentary in the background. I don't think you really need pictures, so I just like hearing testimony and cases and stories from whistleblowers and stuff. So
it's never been told. It must be told.
I'm gonna listen to this in the background.
And it will be told eventually.
Also, I need to do more research for issue 4.
Who they are and why they're here. That'll be a good.
On like the secret space program and all the stuff going on at the deep underground military bases and all that good stuff. So we're gonna be watching ET's Among Us 3, secret space program, and some other stuff, which is on Amazon Prime if you want to watch it.
An intimate interrelationship with advanced intelligence from the stars from the beginning of human history. And that intimate interrelationship is still underway.
08. There it is.
We're living in a very little circumscribed fence, a little fence of reality. And we're supposed to live within this. But there's a world beyond that little fence that we're being told to live in. And I think that there's a lot going on beyond that fence. The real question is, how far advanced are they? What the hell are they doing?
When we talk about extraterrestrials, there are a number of different theories about what's going on. And there are a number of different possibilities. If any of this is true, what's happening? Well, here are some thoughts. They might be coming here as conquerors. What we're seeing might be some sort of advanced, protracted reconnaissance program aimed at assessing our capability to fight back. And maybe genetically modifying us. Maybe, for example, you hear a lot of people talk these days about genetically targeted bioweapons. What if the purpose of the alien abduction phenomenon was to implant in us a genetically targeted bioweapon that at a flick of a switch would wipe us out or enslave us or reduce us to malleable creatures who would do the bidding of these extraterrestrial conquerors.
Yes.
Another possibility is that they come here as explorers. That might be a good thing, or as we've seen in human history, it might lead to exploitation of the natives. This time, the natives are us, human beings. It might lead to things like missionaries and forced conversion to some bizarre alien religion. So, a lot of speculation. We don't know what might be out there. I mean, sometimes when you look at the world, you can't understand why certain countries or people do the things they do. If we can't understand with any real confidence, say, the motivation of the North Korean government, because we can't get inside their heads, what hope have we got of understanding the mindset of an alien? We can only come at this question from an anthropocentric viewpoint, and we are forever going to be hamstrung by that lack of imagination. It is literally inconceivable. We cannot think like an alien because we don't know what an alien is and what an alien is motivated by. So that's the situation. We might be dealing with conquerors, we might be dealing with explorers who might then become exploiters of resources, including us. We might be dealing, and I hope this is where we are on this spectrum, with scientists, and particularly, well, scientists who might be studying us, biologists, perhaps UFOs and visiting aliens are the equivalent of someone like David Attenborough. Here on planet Earth, I'm having a look at these funny little humans and what they're up to. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is that we're dealing with that branch of science that is particularly predicated on looking at humans and human society, anthropologists. Maybe extraterrestrials come here as anthropologists, which would explain why they don't land on the White House lawn. Because once you start openly interacting and communicating, you're not seeing us in our natural habitat and you're not seeing natural behaviors anymore. You get cultural contamination. So maybe they
cargo call.
Study us from afar. Maybe they abduct the odd person and put them back and try and wipe their memories, and some people believe them and some not. But as I say, don't land on the White House lawn, because then you get that contamination. And to truly advanced civilizations in the cosmos, newly emerging civilizations like our own might just be the last interesting thing left in the universe. So perhaps we are fascinating to them on that level. Who are these crazy humans? What are they up to? What are they building? Where are they going? What do we think their journey will be? Let's follow them.
I feel like all these things are probably true to some level.
Extraterrestrials, my goodness, we can
They're like
imagine a
factions
wide
of
range
aliens that
of
control us.
possibilities. But you know, my favorite theory is that the real answer, what aliens
Some that
are
are
doing,
studying
where
us,
they
they're
come
doing
from, what they
experiments
want,
on us.
what the interaction is. Maybe the real answer is something we haven't even thought of yet.
Or all the above. Because I mean, like, anthropologists exist, and then poachers exists, and then, like, I don't know, corporations exist. They all have, like, different goals
Where did all the
things
money
they
go?
want to achieve.
That's a big question.
And they're often
Why
opposed
has
with each
our
other.
economy bottomed out?
Environmentalists.
Was it by chance? Was it by accident? Was it by mistake? I don't think so. There is something called the secret space program, which was announced in the 1940s and 1950s of crashed UFO craft that were recovered. The first recovery that I know of occurred in 1940. It was not Roswell. 7 years before Roswell, an alien craft crashed in Port Girardeau, Missouri. The local townspeople saw the crash, came upon it, and pulled out the pilots. And these were such good Christian, God-fearing people that even though they recognized that the pilots were foreign, they called a minister to come and administer the last rites to these poor creatures. And a certain Reverend Hoffman was called, and he took off. He met the chief of police, and he saw the body of an alien. And so the Army came in and took over the scene. They took the craft. They took the body. That was 1940. In 1947, we all know about the Roswell crash, but there were two other crashes that year, one in Kingman, Arizona, and an earlier one that occurred in April. These craft were recovered. So this resulted in a spurt of activity to reverse engineer these craft. There was an official investigation that was called Project Sign. This was the first investigation and the conclusion of Project Sign was that we were being visited by people from outer space that had a higher level of civilization and technology than we did. But when this report arrived in Washington to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Hoyt S. Vandenberg, he said, "We cannot accept this conclusion. write another paper. And so that paper was quashed, and Project Grudge was initiated, which evolved into Project Blue Book in order to keep track of UFO activities, UFO interaction with human beings, and at the same time to cover it up, which is what Project Grudge and Project Blue Book were primarily assigned to do.
These are documented cases. These aren't necessarily just speculations, but
the landings, the evidence, procure it all, silence the witnesses. And so that went on for a very long time. However, during the same period of time, UFO activity increased throughout the United States, and it's well known that they have had incursions into our military bases, our nuclear facilities, that they track nuclear submarines.
Battle of LA.
And they have a very great concern with nuclear weapons and what human beings intend to do with them. So some of them are guardian angels, and then others are not guardian angels. Some of them were obviously during the 1950s and 60s trying to lure the United States and the Soviet Union into war with each other. So there we have it. We have one faction of aliens that wants to pit mankind against itself in order for us to destroy ourselves through self-immolation in a nuclear holocaust. And at the same time, there's another group of aliens that's showing itself as guardians, protectors of humankind at other times, but also giving stern warnings that should we ever be so foolish as to launch a nuclear missile at another country, we cannot be sure where that missile will land. The secret space program evolved out of this, the need for secrecy, hiding the facts of UFO and flying saucer activity, at the same time having to play catch-up with a civilization that was so far ahead of us that it was feared that if its presence were revealed, the Brookings Institution said that the scientists, doctors, and engineers of our society would be so depressed, so despondent, with the futility of having to catch up with a civilization that was at least 200 years ahead of us, that they would be so disheartened that they might not even get up to go to work the next morning. And that is it in a nutshell. That's a statement in the Brookings Institution report, that science and society would be destabilized by such a revelation. However, the military-industrial complex was not destabilized by any means. They were very stabilized and got to work on reverse engineering the products extracted from the crashed UFOs. This story can be read in Philip Corso's book, The Day After Roswell. Fiber optics, the maser, the laser, anti-gravitational propulsion, all of these things were found in the crashed Roswell disk, the crashed Aztec flying saucer, and several others that have been recovered since that time. So the United States government got to work alongside Canada, and the funding was funneled to the secret space program, and trillions of dollars were invested. And these trillions and trillions of dollars had to come from somewhere. And as a result, many government programs engaged in black operations.
Oh yeah, apparently a lot of all the major drug operations.
I'm sure you all heard of many years ago
at the
there
top
was an
levels,
audit done by the United States Air Force and the United States military, and they were finding
CIA
that the contractors were charging the United States government $1,500 for a hammer, $500 for a toilet seat. So I believe that this is the methodology where all of this money was skimmed off and hidden and funneled into this advanced, very rapid development program to try to catch up with the UFOs,
also the U.S. Air
to build our own
Force's,
UFOs based on their reverse engineered technology.
Also, the U.S. Air Force's space program, which ran in parallel to NASA, the public version, had I think triple the budget of NASA for a very long time, and a lot of that stuff still hasn't been declassified. A lot of these, rockets and other craft that were being launched up like at the same time.
Technology, and we have been successful. As a result, we have something called the Navy's 10th Fleet. It's masked as a cyber warfare organization, software and computer related. However, the Navy 10th Fleet is the name of a space fleet, which was discovered, by the way, by Gary McKinnon when he hacked into the NASA computers. He saw the list of 10th Fleet non-terrestrial officers. There were terrestrial officers, and there was a list of non-terrestrial officers. Gary McKinnon made this publicly known, and he suffered dearly for it. He was ultimately protected by the British Parliament that forestalled his extradition to the United States, where the United States government wanted to try him for hacking and spying and revealing classified knowledge. But the British people and the British Parliament protected Gary McKinnon, and he is safe and sound, probably still recovering from his ordeal in England. The secret space program is real. It is siphoning off our national resources, our national wealth, and preparing the public for what may turn out to be a fake alien invasion. That is a danger. That human beings may be wrought up with panic and fear through the use of MK Ultra mind control techniques in the mass media to make us believe that we are being invaded by people from outer space and that we must go to war with them and that we must use nuclear weapons to fight them. Well, all of that would lead to self-immolation. That's going up in flames for those of you who don't know. Self-immolation, a very bad thing. So it is my hope that we will forestall this, that we will not fall into traps and ploys and false flag attacks and panic at the idea of being invaded by people from outer space. In fact, people from outer space are already amongst us. They've been amongst us for over 70 years. They walk amongst us unrecognized, some of them, and others don't show themselves in the daylight because no one could really bear their presence or their smell. That's been my experience. Certain extraterrestrials have not only a horrible appearance, but have a foul smell that will drive a person into panic. And it takes a very strong mind to hold itself together when assailed by horrible smells that are sometimes described as sulfurous, sometimes described as, beyond description is all I've got to say.
I mean, that makes sense. I never really thought about that, but aliens probably would smell.
Something that's very, very damaging to the human being to be in the presence of these beings. And I do not recommend anyone trying to make contact with Space Brothers. I think we should be cautious. We should not be afraid, but we should be cautious. As President Reagan said, trust but verify. I think verify, then trust.
Something with like a different biology might smell really weird. Sulfurous.
Telepathic communication is mind to mind. Humans are verbal.
All right.
We make a lot of noise.
20 years is, I don't think, accurate because
non-humans,
I think it probably would be around like 20 to like 30 or 40 years if it was just, you know, them like researching and creating new technology. But the fact that there's aliens in the mix, there's alien technology that can be possibly reverse engineered, that's like who knows how many centuries ahead of us. Like, I think that's like, we can use that to jump even farther ahead. Like, there's stuff that is just totally sci-fi that the secret space program is probably able to do after so many years of research and development, so many recoveries of saucers over the years. But yeah, we'll see. Maybe there's some stuff in this movie that talks about that. The technology that they have, because that's what I'm interested in.
Thought,
is the technology the secret space program actually has access to these days.
They work in numbers. Whatever is happening in their minds, it's huge downloads all at once. back in the early 1980s was the first time that I was introduced by a kind of whistleblower person in Army military, active at the time actually, to the notion that there is a secret war and that the secret war has been ongoing around this planet, in this planet, underneath the surface of this planet for millennia. And that the forces that conflict with each other is a mystery, or was a mystery to this man, except that our government was very concerned about who are our allies really and who are our enemies. And that's the way it was laid out to me. And in the process of describing that, this man told me that he was involved in a group that they would get some kind of a call and they would go to wherever there was either a landing or a crash or some sort of interaction with something in the non-human category on this earth. And we've heard about Projects Pounce and Moondust and these various groups that since the 1940s, Truman had organized, MJ-12, Majestic 12, and that part of their work was to have units that were trained. They were top secret. They couldn't talk to anybody, but their jobs were to go to any location on the planet where there might be either a crash or non-humans doing something, and we wanted to get there and monitor. And he said, we have been able to send signals to the Ebens, another type, that are gray. They have heads that are shaped like a pear. They have eyes that are not black lenses, that they are large and usually dark, but not the lens type. And they sent out a frequency asking for help. And that one of the gray craft went to this town in Arizona, met up with our military people. This man telling me this was firsthand. This was his experience. And he said his superior officer came to him and said, one of the Ebens has agreed to let you, the man who's telling me his firsthand story, have the experience of having a telepathic download so you'll know what it is like. And his superior officer said that they had an agreement. The being knew that humans are very alarmed when these creatures float above the ground. That is their preferred state because they have technology that neutralizes gravity. But they know that humans get upset by things that float in the air, and so he said he's agreed to stay on the ground. And when they walk on the ground, they waddle, and it will be funny. It will look like Donald Duck. Be prepared for it. And then he will get to a point where he will start coming toward you in a straight line. At about 6 to 7 feet away, he will stop. You will want to run. You will feel like when we do flamethrower drills, your entire body is going to be feeling fear. And this is in order. I want you to stand your ground. I don't care how much you want to run. I want you to experience this telepathic download. Now, the guy telling me this is 6'3", 6'4", a big guy, and he said, I thought, oh, give me a break. I'm not a child. I'm ready for this. Here comes the being. It's waddling. It looks like Donald Duck in a cartoon. It makes him feel like he wants to laugh. He's hearing his boss telling him exactly what's going to happen. This thing is waddling, coming up. And he said when it got to about 6 feet, his entire legs began to shake. He wanted to run. He felt like he was going to faint. And he said the only thing that kept me standing there is that I knew that my superior officer was off to the left about 30 feet. And by God, I was not going to fall apart in front of him. So I stood there. But Linda, it was terrifying. And then he said the being's head tilted up. And he said when those eyes met my eyes, I lost all control. He said, the best I can tell you, if you took 7 Hollywood movies and you started running them through your mind all at once, sound, temperature, touch, everything is going on in 7 storylines, and on top of every one of the films are 3-dimensional gold hieroglyphs. The symbols are running on top of all of the film. And I realized my mind is trying to ask questions, and with every question my mind is trying to ask, it's making another one of these branching movies. And his boss had told him that when you faint, we'll be there to catch you. And he thought that that was such nonsense that until that moment, with all of these films running through his head, it had never occurred to him that he would ever faint in his life, and he lost consciousness. It was 3 solid hours later. When he opened his eyes, he was lying in a cot in a room. They had caught him. They had put him in a bed. 3 hours to recover, and when he opened his eyes, he was still not able to sit up and get off of the bed. And he said, Linda, that's what my superior officer wanted me to understand. We all would like, just like Spielberg's movie of the little E.T. that got drunk in the kitchen on beer. We'd like to have extraterrestrials take us to Starbucks and sit down and have coffee and tell us about the universe. And he said, it's never going to happen, because the difference between the way our mind works and their minds work, they're overwhelming.
That's kind of scary.
What happened is that
It's
I
awesome, though.
got a call that I might be able to talk to the man who lived with one of the Ebens retrieved from the Roswell region and had been taken to Los Alamos National Lab
Also,
between
I don't know if they're actually
1949 and June 18,
I think EBE is
1952,
extra
when this being died
terrestrial,
of
biological.
unknown causes, is the way the document read that I was shown. And backtracking from that death, this was
Sounds
the
like that's
story
really
that
what
I
they're
was to
calling
hear from the man there at the site in Roswell. He was with a group. They had gotten word that there had been a UFO crash. There is not a date on this in terms of July 2nd to 4th, 1947, that we know that there were 3 crashes. This might have happened somewhere later in 48 or 49. And by then, these groups that were in Project Pounce and Moondust that were trained to come to where there was any kind of an interaction with what were being called by our government extraterrestrial biological entities, they were trained to move in a group into a location. There would be some that would pack up let's call it the metal wreckage or technology that they found, and there would be others in the group that would be focused on the bodies, alive or dead, of the extraterrestrial biological entities. And where the story starts is that the group was moving in and they could see bodies. And the man who is talking to me said, all of a sudden, in his mind, he felt pain, he heard like a cry, high-pitched. The other men are moving and he stops because he doesn't know, he can't see anything in front of him, but he's feeling this horror inside of his own mind, and he is absolutely paralyzed with what is happening? What is happening to me? Is this something here? And he couldn't see anything. He didn't at that point say anything to the men around him. He was completely disoriented by what was happening in his head. And not only was he hearing this high pitch, he was seeing images. He said it was like I was getting flashes, like slides of something, he said, and maybe it was like I was looking through a window. Maybe it was dust. Maybe this was the crash. Maybe this is what was happening, and it's being put into my mind. And I started to move, and I walked, and the other men were on, and I realized something is pulling me. It felt like I was being pulled by Jello to come and look right at a place. And then he realizes there's debris, there is a dark shadow, and that he walked over to the debris and he picked up something, and here is a live being, not human. And when he picked up the debris, that what came into his mind at that moment, because now it was eye-to-eye contact with this being lying in the debris, was everything. What happened, how the whatever went, the malfunction, what they were seeing as the craft went down, the crash, all of it, and then the overriding pain that this being was feeling. And that's when he told everybody there, come, look at this. This is alive. We need to help. Because he was able to see pictures, get sound, feel emotion, it was decided that his assignment from there on out was he was going to stay with this being. They transferred both to Los Alamos. And for that period of time, as I understand, it was in the year 1949, I believe. From there to June 18, 1952, they lived together. And there were 2 sentences that I was told by this man of the downloads that he got during that period of time. He said it was like being with a child with the mind of 1,000 men. He would have these image exchanges and thought exchanges that for some reason he could get from this being and nobody else could. Our government began realizing that they needed to find translators. They needed to find talented people who could get the images and the numbers and the thought words from these beings, and they started looking for translators. That's the category this man became. But he said at one point, in all of their word exchanges in their minds with seeing pictures and symbols, that this being was explaining about where they came from and the cosmos. And this sentence, or sentences, we made you. We put you here. But you have to live it. And this man looked at me and he said, Linda, you know, what I've come to understand from this being that I live with and I loved, the machinery of this universe is reincarnation, the recycling of souls.
What are these
We
called?
treat the soul and recycling like mythology.
It's a movie on Amazon Prime
These beings seem to be communicating
called E.T.'s Among Us
that the
3.
most important part,
part of
our
a
life
series.
as human beings was the soul and what happened at the moment of death.
Interesting.
Individuals that claim to be abducted by aliens. All of the procedures done on them seem to indicate that the aliens are interested in their DNA. And mothers, or mothers-to-be, are exposed to certain babies that are extracted from them during their pregnancy and later on are presented to them so they could interact and eventually have aliens study the interaction between the mother and the fetus. So apparently, long story short, there seems to be a hybridization program run by the aliens. Now, this has been going on for many years and people are trying to figure out what is the real purpose behind it. And the most likely hypothesis is that what the aliens are doing is that they may be using parts of our DNA that would allow them to be able to live in this planet without having any problems. In other words, oxygen is very, very toxic, especially to the DNA. But we have some special techniques in order for us to be able to counteract that, to protect ourselves and to be able to work around it. Aliens do not have this. So for instance, if they were to live in an oxygen-infested atmosphere, they would quickly develop cancer. In similar fashion, we are very susceptible to radioactivity. Aliens are not. Why? Because their crafts are always leaving residuals of radioactive energy. What I'm trying to say is that if we were to go out in another planet and try to live there, we would have to be able to incorporate that inhabitant's evolution into our DNA, which will allow us to actually live in this planet without having any health hazards. And that may be the reason why they're doing all these hybridization experiments in order to create a species that formally belongs to them, but will be able to survive in this atmosphere. And will be able to eat what is offered from this planet, to be able to function, to be able to see, to be able to hear, and to be able to go about in an environment just like ours.
To any skeptic who says, well, these are just stories, these are just accounts, hell, life is just stories. Life is just accounts. The entire criminal justice system, for example, is based on eyewitness testimony. When did we stop thinking eyewitness testimony was important? We put, and rightly so, a vast amount of stock in testimony. Why shouldn't we do so when that testimony comes from someone who says they've seen a UFO or they've had an alien abduction experience?
This is going to be more about the secret space program.
With most researchers or whistleblowers, they get approached by CIA and they are subject to immense pressure to continue their research, receive funding, and at the very end, prove and say to everyone that that.
How you doing over there, B? Not playing any games? Why not? Mm-hmm. What you up to?
Through social medias.
Cool. Making good progress on this page. I got 2 panels done.
That was a hoax. An example of this case is with Colin Andrews. Colin Andrews was UK's foremost expert on crop circles. So what happened was that Colin Andrews, who was a really strong figure on that research field and apparently had so many followers, was approached by CIA, and these are Colin Andrews' words in an interview. He was approached and he was
of course, a lot of these are just personal testimony.
What CIA does with most of researchers is that they fund them and they keep them going and they keep them moving on up to the point where they will say publicly that this is a hoax. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened with Mr. Colin Andrews. He went to the US, he received funding from Rockefeller Institute, of course, and then he came up with an interview stating that at least 80% of those crop circles are hoaxes. In the first movie, It Is Among Us, we did an analysis of the alien autopsy, presumably presented by Ray Santilli back in 1995. We focused mainly on the medical aspects, on certain interesting facts, and we came up with the conclusion that that may have been an actual alien. what happens with Santilli is something that we've seen with other researchers or, so-called whistleblowers. CIA approaches them and invites them to basically debunk everything. Later on, Santilli came up with a confession that apparently this was completely fake, that he manufactured this doll with a friend of his, that he was a specialist on mannequin dolls, and another friend of his that presumably was the surgeon that cut up the body, and that it was just a hoax or a restoration of a film. So he was giving us a bit of a gray story, pretty much indicating that that was a hoax. However, if we take a very close look at this footage, again, we will see that his story doesn't add up. There's absolutely no way that his story explains what we see in this video. And this is for many reasons. One being the fact that in order to manufacture this alien that we see there, you need skills that renders you a superb professional. No amateur can do this. No somebody that is in the field but is not doing an amazing job. So this is not an amateur who's having fun. What makes Ray Santilli completely fraudulent in his confession, in him resending an explanation of the footage, is the fact that in the second video where he has the debris and he's showing all the cockpits and the panels and stuff, apparently he says that they came up with certain hieroglyphs that they put in those beams. But those hieroglyphs are Greek, and they read Eleftheria, which means freedom, which is something that Santilli never came up with in his confession. So I think Ray Santilli must have been under a lot of pressure, and he decided to actually go about, just like Colin Andrews, to play along and to completely ridicule himself. Because if he was really looking out for a career, the last thing he would ever do is to become a mockery for everyone in the field and everyone around the world. Moreover, we know that there's another video out there that shows an alien, again it's back from 1947, that shows an alien being brought into a base. Santilli has nothing to do with this. If we study that second video, we will see several faces. Apparently that, people that used to serve the 509th Group at Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. And if we actually go back to the Museum of Roswell and we look into the archives of the people and the staff of the base, we will be able to identify the first medic that reaches over and leans over just to inspect that alien. If you look closely, that person has a deformity in his left ear, which gives him an identity. Now we can look up this person and we can find this person. And that is going to be a very strong indication that this video is authentic. And if that video is authentic, then Santilli's video is also authentic.
Back in the spring of 1990, one of the subjects that was breaking up during that period of time in 1990 were crop formations. They were on 60 Minutes. They were on 2020. Barbara Walters was talking about how are these incredibly beautiful patterns being put down 800,000 feet long in wheat fields or barley fields or rape fields, especially in England. But that year, a lot of people don't realize, I counted the number of countries, and we had crop formations being photographed in 23 countries. 1990. So by 1991, I wanted to get to England. I wanted to be able to spend time in the formations. I wanted to see what it felt like. And by the summer of 1992, I finally was landing in London and was taken to Marlborough to get to where I was going to be staying in the Vale of Pewsey. For 2,000 years, the cereal crops in the Vale of Pewsey in England have been associated always with the cycles of planting and harvesting. For 2,000 years, the same land has been a home to all kinds of crops. So this has been the heart of where crop formations first emerged in the 1970s A few people knew about them, and then by 88 and 1989 were the first what they called pictograms. Some of them were 750 feet long, 800 feet long. And they were largely circles with lines and odd symbols coming off of the lines. By 1992, when I landed and got to the Vale of Pusey, everything was evolving into very sophisticated patterns. There were beginning to be people who were recognizing that there was mathematical language in these crop formations. And I had not been in a formation. I had studied hundreds from the United States. And so the first thing that I wanted to do, and I joined up with friends,
the crazy thing about crop circles is
organize getting into a crop formation.
They found
and I arrived at night,
and like the legit ones, like all the seeds were missing from the crops that have been knocked down. So like if you just went through with like a plow or something, like it wouldn't take the seeds out. You have to process it to get all the seeds out. So something individually plucked all the seeds out of every single stalk of wheat or whatever the fields were.
Next morning, 7 of us went to one at Milk Hill, a place that's had a spectacular formation every year since around 1989. And when we got there, we parked in an area where we could park cars on a hill, and then we had to go as a group along the top of Milk Hill in order to get up above a 430-foot, I believe it was, huge. It was spirals, paths, big circles. It was not a pictogram. It was like a geometry. And I remember getting up, and we got to a point right above, and some of the people who were more experienced, they said, we've got to come down where we can go down a tram line so we don't trample any of the wheat. And we all, like children, for reasons unknown, were on a hill, but we all started sort of running. And we ran all the way down into the Milk Hill tram line, going right along the Milk Hill formation. Now, there were about 7 of us. I just happened, for some reason, to be the person who was at the furthest. So I am going down the tram line the furthest this way, and everybody else was kind of spread around along here, 400 feet, bigger than a football field. I had my 35 millimeter camera hanging around my neck, and I had the curiosity to go right into this formation. I wanted to see, what does it feel like to be in it? And so I'm walking with tremendous innocence, my first pattern ever on Earth, and I get to an opening, and it was like I hit a wall of jello. It actually was firm and made me kind of like I bumped into a wall. I'm not seeing a wall. I'm not seeing anything but air, but I could feel there was this solidness, and I stopped, puzzled. I looked down. The others had stopped. Nobody was going into this pattern. So I brought my 35 millimeter up. I put it so I could change and go down real close and come back in wide, and I started taking photographs, and I realized when I went into a zoom in a particular place only about 5 feet from where I was blocked by this whatever jello, I could see wheat this direction, wheat this direction. I could see another layer, and I thought, oh my Lord, I want to get in there. This thing is layered. And after about another minute or two, whatever this strange jello that had blocked apparently all of us, it just kind of evaporated. And then I felt almost like I was being invited into the crop formation at that point. I didn't want to step on anything. So I went on tippy-toe for a while, like in a circle, trying to see how can I get close, how can I get photographs of the layers. And finally, my curiosity overwhelmed my desire not to step on any of this crop. And I, sort of on my tiptoes, I went to where I had been trying to photograph. And I got down on my hands and knees.
I'm working.
I put my hand, here was the top layer.
Yeah.
Here was the layer going this direction. Here was another layer, and it went down.
Making progress.
opposite
believe you.
directions.
You don't have
And
to
then my
believe me.
fingers.
No, I
could
guess I
feel
believe
the
you.
soil.
You can see
I
all
could
the
feel the soil
inking that
coming
I
under my
I guess I
fingernails
believe
as I
you.
did this, and
Why are you being
realized
lame?
that the top of the formation that was going
know.
like this all the way down was about up to maybe 12 inches. That from the soil up, this pattern was spread for 430 some feet with all of these layers. And there were not even layers. There were areas where it swirled like water in circles. There were all kinds of exquisite, nothing was out of place. It was breathtaking.
What?
And then I felt this
Oh,
pull
nice.
to go to the right. Everybody else had gone to the far end, and at 430 feet, I'm that far away, they're that far away, but I'm pulled to the right. And as I'm walking, I'm trying to walk on the edge on my toes. But as I'm walking to go to this far end that seems to be pulling me, I'm realizing that the complexity of those 7 layers and these beautiful swirls, it's continuing all of the way. And I get to the end. It's wheat that was about waist high. I'm now at the edge. You can't go any further. And here is solid wheat, like you were inside of a velvet carpet, but it's wheat. And as I'm standing there, looking out on the solid wheat, and then looking in at the complexity of all of these layers, and then back out onto this wheat, it was like a thought voice. It said, life on earth is not guaranteed. And I turned again, and as I turned to look out on the wheat with life on earth is not guaranteed, suddenly it was like when you're in the presence of something like a Bengal tiger. And the Bengal tiger can be 20 feet away from you in a zoo or a safari park, and you're protected. But when you look into the eyes of a Bengal tiger, there is not only profound intelligence, but a sense of danger, because the intelligence is capable of doing anything. And at that moment, looking out on that wheat, it was as if a Bengal tiger was staring back at me. And I remember that moment. This is what made this pattern. This is an intelligence that is capable of destroying us or letting us live. Life on earth is not guaranteed. And it was at that moment that every crop formation that I was ever in by the hundreds for the next decade, that voice was always there, that sense, this is really important. These crop formations have mathematical language. If we were smart enough, we would all be sharing what is the language in these crop formations and praying that that Bengal tiger intelligence knew that a lot of us actually cared about whether we survive on Earth or not. Back in 1992, during my first trip to England, as I began moving into crop formations and feeling them out, a lot of us started saying, you know, this formation, it feels really positive and I feel good, but I was in that one over on the Barn Road and it felt terrible. And that made me start thinking, what if there are 2 types of energy, 2 types of intelligences that are even competing with each other in the crops of the world, like the skin of the world, and that where we feel really good in some, it may be something that is trying to inspire us, to give us joy, to give us exultation, which I felt in those crop formations. And those that made me feel sick or that made me stop, that was the beginning of these crop formations are not equal. Not all are positive and not all are negative, but when they are negative, it had a physical impact on the body and I think the mind and the soul that many of us who came to go to crop formations together would have this moment where this I have to leave. Now, what else was interesting about this? I began to realize that over the 10 or 12 years that I kept going to England, that the crop formations, if this was going to happen, where you felt like you were sucked of air, it was going to be in something like an 8-fold geometry or a 5-fold geometry or maybe an 11-fold. It was never a 3, it was never a 6, it was never a 7, and it was never a 9. And in the whole issue of sigils and ancient geometries and mathematical laws being underneath the sacred geometry, it was one of those evolutions that people who were mathematicians began to study in detail and put on websites what they were finding in terms of mathematical ratios and crop formations. And eventually, I remember one of the first dialogues I had with people. Did you ever feel that when you were in an 8-fold geometry that it was different than the 6-fold geometry across the field? And there had been one specific example where there were 6 or 7 of us, and there had been a Windmill Hill, and there had been an 8-fold geometry, and then in the field right opposite, it was a 6-fold. And all of us who had gone into the 8-fold geometry, when we got into the 6-fold, everybody was saying, there is a difference. Could it be that those behind certain geometries, whatever the intelligence, are in conflict with everything that is behind the 3, the 6, the 9, the 7 geometry? You will see that the flower of life, which begins with 3s that go to 6s, that go to 9s, that is associated with what is called the light or the Christ line. If you go to the 8, that 8 geometry is associated with Mesopotamia and ancient sigils, as if math, numbers, associations with things in the unseen are part of the fabric of what is behind the crop formations that have occurred on this planet. It may be subtle to many people, but the challenge is we need to understand why it is that a place like Glastonbury, with the red and white springs that have been going since, they say, for 2,000 years, and that Arimathea brought Christ there, and that there is a relationship between this land where crop formations seem to have focused. Could it be that it isn't just math, that it isn't just something from another intelligence, that the crop formations themselves go to the heart of something that is trying to get human attention, that the soul of humanity is at stake, that life is not guaranteed, and that the crop formations seem to be spelling out that there is conflict between light and dark, numbers and mathematical language. And that has always been with me ever since I spent so much time in them, that it goes beyond beauty, it goes beyond poetry, it goes beyond mathematical language. That the crop formations that began coming to this planet in the 1970s have something to do with a philosophical argument about what is allowable to do with life. And that the crop formations, to me, today in 2017, the crop formations have always been like a signal. I've always felt they were a signal. We have a path that we can go to life, or we have a path we can go to death. And something like that Bengal tiger intelligence is watching, provoking, waiting, and I hope inspiring the move to life.
Is that it? Bro, they barely talked about the secret space program. That was disappointing. see if there's anything else I can find. Ooh, Above Majestic. Oh, I've been wanting to watch that movie. I guess I talked about it a little bit, but oh yeah, Phil Schneider. This is free with ads. Let's watch this. Talking about Phil Schneider. He died after he spoke about these encounters in the deep underground military bases, the domes. Should be interesting.
As we mentioned, Donald Trump today called for more military spending, more troops, more ships, more submarines, more planes. Didn't say how big the increase in military spending would be, but he did throw out a lot of numbers in justifying the increase.
And look at this, almost $600 billion in spending there, almost as much as all the other 9 of the top 10 combined, Anderson.
The Pentagon has secured a $630 billion budget for next year, even though it's failed to even account for the money it's received since 1996. A whopping $6.5 trillion of taxpayer cash have gone to defense programs, none of which has been audited. And this black budget has sparked concerns over political fraud.
A Reuters investigation says since 1996, the Pentagon has spent $8.5 trillion in taxpayer money that has never been accounted for.
One thing I found very interesting in this report is that the Pentagon apparently uses a standard operating procedure to enter false numbers or so-called plugs to cover lost or missing information in their accounting in order to submit a balanced budget to the Treasury. So they can write in everything.
I mean, that's probably the most shocking part of this, is that they get to the end of the day and they say, oh, there's money missing. What do we do? Well, we'll just put a number in there that says it's
They just
there.
make it up.
Sort it out later. I mean, again, this is the type of operating practice that if you did it in your own business, if you tried to do it with your own taxes for the government, they'd haul you off to jail.
What is the Pentagon's black budget being used for? Weapons? Defense? This is the story of one military family's extraordinary claims. Claims that could be found true in a hidden reality.
I'm Phil Schneider. I spent 17 years in black budget programs, government geologist as engineer, structural engineer with aerospace applications, self-taught metallurgist. In working with the black projects, I was involved in something very controversial, almost totally unbelievable to most of you. I was involved in building another base inside of Dulce, New Mexico, which is Los Alamos Laboratory. On the southwest part of the Archuleta Mesa, we were in the process of the early stages of building. We drilled 4 large tunnel-like holes. Some of them ran 2.5 miles under surface. Anyway, after we drilled all 4 holes, it took about 2 days to drill all 4 of them. And when you build an underground base, you drill 4 basic holes, and you build called stopes or cross-member holes across, and you use blasting equipment, and you literally blast out or tunnel out or deflagrate or melt rock out. The equipment kept coming up broken. So we wanted to go down and we wanted to send somebody down there, a human observer, or human observers in this case, to find out what was going on. When I saw Green Beret and Black Beret people encamped inside of our geologist camp, I knew something was up. The gig was up. In this process, I was lowered down the basket of one of these holes, and about from me to this elderly woman here in the front was sitting a 7-foot-tall alien gray. The stench was worse than the worst garbage can you can imagine. I didn't waste any time. I reached for my pistol. At that time, as an engineer, I didn't have time to carry all the folderol of one of these big submachine guns that all the sea spray and the yellow fruit and the outer perimeter and inner perimeter security people carried. I carried a little Walther PPK pistol with a 9-shot clip. Plus, you're in almost like a spacesuit environment, and you're reaching for a gun. It's not the easiest thing to do, and then to pop a clip in it and start shooting. And I killed 2 of them. Yes, they're mortal, and they do die. However, in the process, one of them did this. All I remember is that he just kind of waved his hand in front of his chest, and the next thing I know, this blue beam hit me and just literally opened me up like a fish. It was some form of electrical force, because the kind of like being hit by a lightning bolt burned all my toenails off of me. And there was a Green Beret that was right behind me. But he risked his life. He shoved me back in the basket and hit the button and took me up. And I wouldn't be alive talking to you today if it wasn't for him. I'm forever indebted. He lost his life. 66 Secret Service agents, Green Berets, Black Berets, crack troops lost their lives because the government, our United States government, lied, did not tell us anything about the alien threat. There's a war underneath there, and I'm talking dead.
Emily just got married. Congrats, by the way. And she's applying for life insurance online right now from her couch with Haven Life. Let's watch.
Let's not.
Looks like Emily can buy a
Mute during the ads. Oh, we're just back.
The large alien grays had been encamped there for as best as believed possible about 400 or 500 years. Had been one of their internal bases. And we'd drilled holes right on top of it. All the stinking air, all the black sooty air came right out as soon as the first hole was sunk, and all this soot came up. And, well, that's when all the hell broke loose, really. All started. I have a picture of one of the aliens been working for the United States Pentagon for the last 58 years. His name is Valiant Thor.
Oh, I've heard of Valiant
He's
Thor.
right here. There's my father in the background. This whole place, the ready room of the USS Eldridge, Al Bielek has probably explained, or maybe even shown you this picture. There's a list of some of the notable people in it. They're all the atomic bomb scientists of the day, all the time variant experimentalists of the day, all the top physicists of that particular day. This was in August of 1943.
Phil Schneider gave most of his lectures in 1995. He gained a following speaking around the United States. telling people about his alleged experiences. Phil claimed that he personally knew people who also worked in black budget programs who were murdered, and that most of them were made to look like a suicide.
11 of my best friends in the last 22 years have been murdered. 8 of them called suicide. I finally got wind of one of them. Portland police is now involved in one of them. Murder by suicide, they call it.
On August 6, 1993, 2 years before his lectures, one of Phil's best friends, Ron Rummel, was found dead in Same Maclay Park, Oregon. He had suffered a fatal gunshot wound to the head, and a gun was found nearby. Police ruled it as suicide, but Phil and many others strongly believed that he was murdered. Ron Rummel was best known for publishing the Alien Digest, a newsletter filled with stories and testimonies regarding the UFO cover-up.
Author Ron Rummel was about to publish a book revealing what he believed to be the real purpose of the Star Wars project when his body was found here in Maclay Park in Portland, Oregon. His death was ruled suicide, but few agree with that verdict.
As far as the police and the FBI are concerned, it's case closed. Unfortunately, there's the shocking thing that his murderer, I believe his murderer, is still out there at large.
Why is it you're speaking out?
There have been enough lives taken under the premise of suicide when they were actually very stable individuals. They had families and they had lives to look forward to, and they had every reason to live. And if there is some form of conspiracy out there, then the more people that are talking might end up saving lives in the long run. My friend Ronald Lee Rummel was an Air Force officer. He's a Silver Star winner. There's a good chance that when I fly back to Vegas, I have to drive home. I left my car down in Vegas. I have to drive home alone. I'm scared to hell.
On January 17th, 1996, after not being seen for at least 5 days, Phil Schneider was found dead in his apartment by his landlord and a detective from the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. The autopsy report listed the cause of death as unknown, but it was later discovered that Phil was actually strangled by his own catheter hose. Was this a case of negligence or a cover-up?
There's a number of you ladies present, so I won't gore you out, but Al has seen some of the wounds, and there's
Jesus
other
Christ.
people that have been to a few of my...
Strangled by his own catheter hose. Holy They just showed pictures of that. That's insane.
Other lectures, and they can attest that I have been shot.
Unknown. I'm pretty sure this it seems pretty clear how he died. He was murdered.
Off the road.
There's no way you can like.
Is an account of Phil's
like
death, a
firmly
case
tied
that
around
reeks
his neck.
of suspicion, neglect of duty, and disregard for human dignity. The first official police report defines Phil's cause of death to be from natural causes.
A stroke? Are
On
you kidding
January
me?
16th, 1996, Deputy Officer McClelland is alerted by a suspicious apartment manager that he has not seen Phil for weeks. Upon first investigation, when entering Phil's apartment, Officer McClelland finds Phil's body beside his bed, with his face lying in the seat of his own wheelchair. Medical and forensic examiner Mr. Coleman chooses not to respond to the crime scene. At this point, Phil had been dead for 3 to 4 days. January 17th, his body is then whisked away to a funeral home. January 18th, Mr. Took calls from the funeral home to alert the police that he has found a catheter cord wrapped around Phil's neck. This leads to the starting of Detective Hagen's investigation on the same day. Hagen seems to be the only one interested in following up this case honestly. He calls medical examiner Coleman and Sergeant Joyce, who both elect not to respond. Upon further investigation, while interrogating Deputy McClelland, the deputy recalls the catheter cord being near Phil's neck at the scene of the crime. It is concluded in this report that the only person who could have been around Phil at this time was a woman from the Oregon Senior and Disabled Services. Other things recovered from the scene of the investigation were 7 pill medications. Detectives Harris and Kennel are then assigned to the case. An autopsy is to be held by Dr. Gunson on January 19th. This was requested as well by Cynthia, Phil's late wife. The autopsy report surmises Phil's cause of death by asphyxiation, ruled a suicide. Recovered stomach material showed no signs of pills. Furthermore, blood and urine are placed on a 3-month hold, only to be reported as lost when Cynthia calls after the given time has passed. The catheter cord is described as being wrapped around the neck once and then tied from the front very tight. Now, you must ask yourself, how can Phil be found dead via strangulation with his face in the seat of his own wheelchair? Is this something that he could do himself without taking any form of medical assistance in order to sedate? What do we have here? Is this a clean-cut case of suicide? Or could there likely be foul play? Could this be a case of murder by suicide? This case was determined on January 19th as death by suicide, which is further indicated on his death certificate. But something of even more suspicion appears in this case. In the Oregonian obituaries, a statement is given, not by Cynthia, that he died from a stroke.
So, what happened here?
Tried to get some samples of Phil, my dad, and my mom. They were suddenly missing. Mysteriously missing.
And what did they say? They were just as surprised as you were?
Yeah. Oh, we don't have those samples.
It's like they never did, or they just
We'll
just didn't even know.
They said we'll hold them for a year. My mom came back 11 months before the due date, there's 1 month until they would not hold them anymore. And, they suddenly didn't have them anymore. Yeah.
Look, let's get right down to it. When you're dealing with something of the magnitude, what it appears to be, that is the presence of a variety of non-humans here on Earth that are here for some sort of agenda, and everything else that goes along with that, including possible collaboration by various human groups with them. This is obviously incredibly explosive material. And so it goes without saying that the intelligence agencies, the deep black agencies, black ops groups that are involved in this would need to keep this as quiet as possible. They would have to, for their own preservation. So in other words, secrecy becomes
Poor
the
Phil.
ultimate goal.
Rip Phil Schneider.
And that means secrecy, in theory, forever. Forever. Secrecy forever.
Died to tell us about them tunnel aliens.
Come out about this. You have to find a way to disable those leaks. Either by disabling the information or the individual behind it. Doesn't have to be by killing them. It could mean by ruining their reputation, by discrediting them in one way or another. That's just as good. Certainly, one thing that we know in the last 60, 70 years is that assassination techniques have become very, very sophisticated. Very sophisticated. The art of suiciding someone, that is, killing them, thinking it suicide. This is widespread. It's been widespread for many years. During the days of the Cold War, the KGB was very good at this. To this day, we're not going to get the CIA to admit it, but we know that this happened. It happened in the case of a fellow named Frank Olson in the early 1950s, who had been a biological warfare expert, who was given LSD without knowledge by a CIA friend. Long story short, he was taken to a large hotel in New York City, the 10th floor, and was thrown out the window. It made it seem like a suicide. It was no suicide. Olson was killed because he became a security risk. This is an old game. So back to our scenario here of multiple non-human groups with possible human-alien interaction going on. This is a secret that has to be kept from infancy. And anyone who threatens that secrecy has got to be handled, whether by discrediting that person or failing all else by killing them.
Hi, Sabrina. Hi, Jen. So this Aveeno moisturizer goes beyond just...
Ad time. So muting time. Rip Phil. and all the other whistleblowers who got suicided. Oops, the ad wasn't playing. Where was that?
It seems easy to accept the theory that Phil was a victim of homicide. But what does that mean for his claims of aliens living underground? Years after Schneider's death, other claims of a joint human-alien base underneath Dulce, New Mexico are surfacing left and right. The book UFO Highway by Anthony Sanchez is essentially transcripts of interviews with a person only known as Colonel X, who supposedly worked inside this
Colonel
facility
X.
and is known
Sounds like
to
a supervillain
believe
name.
that Phil Schneider was really there. Shows like History Channel's UFO Hunters have even visited the area looking for clues.
It's a 14-mile underground tunnel that goes under that mountain there.
Yes.
Even Jesse Ventura's conspiracy theory on True TV paid a visit to the alleged location of the Dulce base.
They have it pretty well secured.
Do they?
Yeah.
Some other pretty credible sources for alien activity in the Archuleta Mesa include the high number of Apache Native Americans who have some pretty insane stories of strange happenings in the area.
Rumor has it there is a secret base hidden underneath the Archuleta Mesa here. The mountain overlooks Dulce. Some people in town say the base is run by aliens working with our federal government to conduct mind control and genetic experiments.
Do you believe that? Yeah. Well, a whole bunch of people seen it, you know.
Like the ground open up, steam coming out of it.
Jerry Julian
The ground open up, steam coming out.
Right here.
People that live near this military base just see crazy shit all the time.
You know, it was flat like this.
That's so funny though.
Many of her neighbors.
She asked them, like, do you think that there's a secret military base here and that they're working with aliens? And she's like, yeah, I do.
Similar strange sightings.
Fat in the middle and kind of like rounded on the sides. You're speechless, you know? You just don't know what to think.
Sometime in the 70s, things changed. That's when cows started turning up mutilated.
They just cut out in between the legs right here. We seen one.
I know it's not a predator. It's doing it. There's someone's doing it.
Local police never definitively said who's to blame. Locals say it has to be something out of this world. They say they know it sounds crazy.
I'll submit to a lie detector test or anything, you know.
To be fair, at this point we have to also play devil's advocate with Phil Schneider's extraordinary claims. It is entirely possible that he simply heard about the tales of UFOs and underground bases in the Archuleta Mesa area and made up his own story based on those stories. In order to at least make an attempt at finding out if he was telling the truth or not, we must first know who Phil Schneider was.
I kind of knew about Philip. I mean, I had met him through the Oregon Agate and Mineral Society in Portland, Oregon. And I had been a past president of the society. We had about 500 members. So, you know, it was a large group of people who came together every other week to study rocks and minerals.
What year was this?
1985. Philip grew up in a Navy Armed Forces family because he was all over places with his dad. see, while he was young, I think they also went to London. It was in the early 50s, 1950s. So he was in London, and I think that's when Oscar was working in NATO. He was doing a lot of armed force work in NATO. But he kind of knew that his dad was doing a lot of top secret things later on in life.
I'd like to also mention something about my father. My father was a U-boat captain in Hitler's Navy. He was captured by the French, turned over to the Third Army, U.S. Third Army, and then U.S. Third Army turned him over to the Navy. And he was a master machinist. Now, that's not a journeyman. A master means they can take a block of metal and make a gun or a watch or some other fine instrument. He was a master machinist. He later became an MD doctor and part of the aerospace medicine group of the United States Navy. Was instrumental in helping build the USS Nautilus and its predecessor, the Enterprise, the first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, and other ships like it.
Phil's father, Oscar Otto Schneider, was also involved in government secrecy and black projects. In the 1990s, during Phil Schneider's lecture tour across the United States, he was known to carry many documents and pictures providing evidence to certain testimony about controversial subjects he would be discussing. Furthermore, there were 4 documents which Phil carried with him on lecture tour. These documents were allegedly owned by Oscar Schneider while he was in office working for the United States Navy in the 1950s. During this time, the rumored Philadelphia experiment took place, and perhaps these documents are the smoking gun that prove, in fact, the Philadelphia experiment did occur. The first document details an autopsy report on one of the crew members from the Philadelphia experiment.
One of the letters that Oscar wrote about the autopsy of the Philadelphia experiment crew members, the items that he was pulling out of their back of their eyes and their arms and their legs, these little things that looked like transistors. It's exactly what they were. They were little surveillance items that were placed into the bodies of the Philadelphia experiment crew members.
In this letter, it is addressed to Lieutenant Nathan F. Twining. Oscar seems to report on the vessel, which Twining's staff couldn't find. Furthermore, it includes an order from J. Edgar Hoover to have all personnel undergo psychological testing. The third letter addresses Edward Condon. Edward Condon is well known for his involvement explaining away all UFO phenomenon as simply optical illusions. However, in this letter, Oscar seems to be reporting to Edward that 7 Philadelphia Project experiencers had escaped from a psych ward that Oscar was holding and testing them at. He goes on to say that J. Edgar had declared the incident classified as a 1A prime directive, possibly meaning something in regards to a top-secret security clearance, finishing this letter with a reference to Nikola Tesla's spatial analyzer. This is significant because Nikola Tesla has always been known to be involved with the design of the machine which would create the fabled Philadelphia experiment's invisible technology. Condon, having been known most notoriously as the leading UFO debunker of his time, paved the way for secrecy and cover-ups in this realm that we study today. The fourth and final letter, Oscar Schneider writes again, in consideration of the latent facts considering the fate of the USS Fahrensath DE-173, all ships' personnel and material must be quarantined absolute until further notice. No exceptions. An on-site naval inspection is ordered forthwith, as Bureau of Ships reticent requirements in Section 93A. Please include DE-173's ship's log to Admiral Roscoe Hillencolt, USN. Consider them and all events of nature above secret. C-Class ARH-9, Project Blue Sky. Oscar Schneider, Captain, USN.
At this point, it appears that Phil Schneider's father, Oscar, was very likely involved in classified operations that involved top-secret technologies. But what about his son, Phil? What do we really know about his work?
I would say late 60s, he started his work, and then I have Social Security records under a wrong Social Security number, and I think this is how the Black Ops get away with a lot of things, is they put you under the wrong Social Security security number, so you can't prove your work history with them. But I can prove that under the wrong social security number, he worked for Morrison Knudsen, which is a contractor, it's a civilian contractor that works for the Army or Navy. He did some work in Trojan Nuclear after that. By the early 1980s, he was applying for SSI. So I know by the early 1980s, his career is done. He's so injured that he cannot do any more work, and his memory is like totally lost as to what he did before. It wasn't until after we got married and he got good medical care and stopped taking the medications he was taking when I first met him that he started to remember all of the things that are now on the internet.
Hello, Marie.
Want a squirt?
Lots of food, soft drink.
So tell me when did Phil start telling you about his past and his work?
It was soon after. He kept saying that he had to take Dilantin to prevent seizures. But I noticed when he took Dilantin, he would have a seizure. It was the other way around. It was actually killing him. And it was disrupting him emotionally, physically, so much that he didn't have much of a memory of anything in his past. And then after we were married, he got really good medical care. It slowly started to come back. I mean, it was like, he would even say to me, gee, I hope you don't think I'm like blind because I'm just remembering this, but wow, you know, these things start coming up and I just suddenly remember what's really happened. But that's really when it started. When Oscar died,
so they added on some drugs that make
Philip
it
was
forget.
down in his basement, found a file
Seizures
full of stuff.
killing him?
That was
That's
just
crazy.
Unbelievable. And he showed me most of that. I mean, I saw the original envelopes with the original paperwork that had the drawings on it. I saw the original photographs with the stamps on the back from the Navy. I mean, it was all real stuff. This was not faked. He shared so much with me, even though we were divorced at the time. So I saw all this stuff that came out of the file cabinet. But he'd been talking to Ron about it a lot. They were doing a little alien magazine, a little digest. And then his dad died and he found all this stuff in the basement. Well, Ron was murdered that same year. And that infuriated me. As Philip grew up, he went to Lincoln High School here in Portland, because I have a transcript of his senior high school. So that was pretty normal, except it does indicate on that transcript that he had an IQ of 163. Now, I know Phil told me that before he had his medical issues, he could speak 11 languages.
Oh my
I
God.
believe that because he would suddenly, in the middle of the night, sleeping together, he would suddenly start rattling off different languages. So this is although in his sleep he consciously couldn't remember how to speak those languages, but in his sleep unconsciously he could still connect with some of it.
This is the new one.
Good. Now look down the side of the lift. Can you see two big clamps?
Philip.
Verizon is going ultra, and
Oh
now you
boy,
can too
ad
with the
time
offer you
again.
just can't miss. For a limited time, get a 5.
The whole his father being machinist for the military is interesting. These black projects, because it's probably he was like a Nazi. It was probably part of the whole Operation Paperclip thing.
Underground bases and underground civilizations. This is a very old idea in human history. You know, going back even thousands of years, you've got ancient tribes around the world that have made these claims. We would say it's in their myths, but that there are secret caverns, secret races, secret tribes that exist under the ground. And really, when one talks about, for example, hollow earth theory, that's a lot of what we're talking about here. Not all hollow earth theorists say that the entire earth is hollow. A lot of them will say that there are just substantial caverns under the ground where there are civilizations that are down there. So that's an old idea. You get it in a lot of ancient European, I think like the Germans have a tradition, Native Americans have this tradition. The Tibetans may have the most extensive tradition of this, for all I know. South America traditional tribes have this as well. So the idea in the Tibetan tradition, from what I have understood about it, is that there are different races below the surface of the earth, including reptoid or reptilian races that are supposedly from other worlds. I'm not making this up. So that by itself is interesting, and you might ask, why do all of these disparate civilizations have these types of ideas? And I don't have the answer to that, but I can tell that's an old idea.
Dolan goes on to explain the supposed connection between the Nazis and Tibetan hollow earth theories.
What you really get is in the 20th century, where the Nazis and their predecessors, let's call them the Thule Society, which was a kind of a mystical sect that the Nazis really drew a lot out of in forming their own ideology. The Thule Society was very interested in Tibetan myths about openings into the earth. This idea of deep underground tunnels, bases, crisscrossing the world. And since this was a Tibetan idea, we have to assume that the Nazis themselves were familiar with this idea as well.
There's no question that the secret underground bases do exist. And by the way, it's not only the military of the United States or of other countries, who are making these underground and also undersea facilities. Other agencies and organizations do it as well. All that is needed is the requisite will, funding, expert personnel, and technology. In the early to mid 20th century, you had the French, of course, who constructed the so-called Maginot Line in eastern France to guard against German invasion in World War II. There was a military civil engineering organization in the Third Reich called the Todt Organization, and it was named after Fritz Todt. Fritz Todt was a brilliant civil engineer. He was the father of the German Autobahn system. During the World War II period, Adolf Hitler asked Fritz Todt to lend his engineering expertise to the military program of the Third Reich.
All the panels with streamlining are just always fun.
An engineering agency which was called the Todt Organization. Now, Fritz Todt died in a plane crash in 1942, and one of his deputies named Xaver Dorsch took over control of the agency. I did find a couple of Project Paperclip memos from 1947 that specifically requested Xaver Dorsch by name to be brought to the United States to work on the United States military's underground plant construction program. The American military certainly was well aware of who Xaver Dorsch was and his expertise. In his day, he was probably the preeminent authority on underground base construction, whether in Germany or in the United States.
Ruins have been uncovered in Argentina, but they're not from an ancient civilization reportedly connected with the Nazi regime. According to an article in the New Zealand Herald, a secret bunker was found which appears to have been planned for members of the Nazi Party to use a hideout after losing the war and fleeing to South America.
But I've had people tell me that some of the bases are as deep as 10, 12, 14 miles down.
Okay, so if they're 1 mile
Jesus
deep,
Christ.
how would they make that? Like, can you state possibly a piece of technology that you came across in documents you were researching, or?
Oh yes. Since at least the 1950s, the mining and civil engineering industries have had the capability to sink major shafts straight down 1, even 2 miles or more, and then to tunnel out from the bottom of these shafts, whether for mining purposes or for anchored tunnel complexes. One of the most common form is to use very hard cutting heads on the tunnel boring machines that rotate. It would be like a huge version of the drills used in the petroleum industry and natural gas industry to drill very deep underground boreholes.
I've heard theories of also
Mega
nuclear-powered drills.
Yes, I cite this technology in my first book. These are called subterranes. Subterranes are nuclear-powered. They use a small fission nuclear reactor. The nuclear reactor is contained within a machine. The research and design was done
Nuclear-powered
at
tunnel
Los
melter.
Alamos National Laboratories back in the 20th century. And there were some patents.
Dude, my physics teacher
The
talked about
research
this.
team at Los Alamos, if they are in use, they are being used clandestinely in great secrecy.
Could you also maybe lend to the audience some examples of real underground facilities?
The most famous one would be under Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, which used to be the NORAD headquarters. Now it's a backup NORAD base, but that would be the most famous one. I guess it's appeared in many movies. It's large, it's sophisticated, it's deep. Then you also have the famous FEMA underground base beneath Mount Weather in Northern Virginia. It's run by FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. It's also quite deep, sophisticated, large. There's the so-called Site R complex that is the Pentagon's alternate command center, which is underground on the border between Maryland and Pennsylvania. Then, of course, you have the well-known Area 51 facility. There's been quite a lot of underground tunneling excavation done there. Many people have spoken about facilities out there.
Yes, sir. Let's go back to that so-called Area 51, because in people's minds, when you say I can't talk about it because it's classified, conjures up, oh, there it is. There's the cover-up. Can you give us any hint, without violating any sense of a confidential nature, what kinds of things might be happening?
Sir, I cannot. Forgive me. I just do not know.
Is there anyone in the Air Force that can?
I'm going to have to defer that to public affairs. It's outside of my area of expertise.
Do you believe in UFOs?
Personally, no, sir.
Why not?
Ma'am, I have no reason to believe that they're real.
And then there are other ones that are perhaps less well known.
Expert deflection.
The NSA in Laurel, Maryland,
Denial.
which is at Fort Meade. Now, Fort Meade is an armed facility, but the NSA is actually the major activity there. And there are just literal acres, multiple acres of supercomputers beneath Fort Meade that go down and down and down. I've been told 20 levels, maybe more. And then Los Alamos National Lab in northern New Mexico. Then you have Camp David in Maryland. Many people are familiar with Camp David as a United States presidential retreat where presidents often helicopter to for rest and relaxation. But less commonly known is that there is a massive underground facility that spreads out for miles. In the run-up to the first war against Iraq, Bechtel built 3 deeply buried, sophisticated underground facilities in Saudi Arabia. They were used during the war, the first war. Stormy Norman Schwarzkopf, who was the American military commander, spent most of that war underground in Saudi Arabia. And in China, it has come to light that the Chinese have constructed something like 3,000 miles of underground tunnels to house their nuclear arsenal.
What's the
3,000
benefit
miles.
of building all of these bases in and around the world? What is it for? Is it for keeping things secret? And what are they keeping secret? Is it for keeping things away from the public? Is it also for protection in some way? Could you elaborate on that?
Yes to all of that. All of those are considerations. The motivation for going deep underground and or deep undersea is often driven by concerns of security and secrecy. Weapons production and storage happens underground, whether for nuclear weapons or other kinds. This has been going on ever since the World War II period.
It looks almost like a scene from an action movie. Dozens of ballistic missile launching systems inside a gigantic cave. But the video shows Iran's missile program is very real and very big, as the head of the Elite Revolutionary Guard's Aerospace Division says. The missiles in various ranges are mounted on launchers in all bases and are ready to be launched, he told an Iranian state TV reporter, and added, that is, if enemies make a mistake.
You also have research facilities underground. The CERN Super Collider on the border of Switzerland and France would be a good example. That one is very much publicly known and discussed. There are other underground research facilities, including at Area 51 and elsewhere, that operate much more out of the public eye. There are many rumors about clandestine extraterrestrial facilities, both underground and undersea, and a growing number of people have come forward over the years with anecdotal accounts of having seen and or been taken into such facilities by a variety of reasons, both by extraterrestrials and also by shadowy elements of the United States military, by clandestine units. I do take these stories seriously. I do believe that these types of facilities exist. What are the reasons that they would be here and underground? Again, for secrecy, for security, and for purposes of communication, command, and control. The same reasons that the United States military.
Ads again. I was listening to that. Oh, I guess I did sign up for watching this with ads. This is what I'm talking about, though. All this juicy information about dumbs. That's why I'm watching this documentary. Tell me more. I want to hear more whistleblower stories from the military bases. You get lots of good visuals too, which you guys can't see, but I get to see. This movie's called The Underground, by the way, director's cut. It's on Amazon Prime. Or it's on Amazon, not Amazon Prime.
How corporations and military rule the underworld.
I spent years going through reams of technical documentation from the military-industrial complex, and Morrison Knudsen is one of those that would pop up in the bibliographies. Companies like Parsons, Fingerhoff, Clay and Douglas, Hewitt, Black and Vetch. Of course, you have two military agencies, the Army Corps of Engineers, which is definitely involved in constructing underground bases and tunnels. It has been for more than half a century.
And why does my left hand always get sore when I'm drawing on my right hand? How does that make any sense?
In underground and undersea construction. Those would be the lead military agencies, but there are large corporations that are involved. The Bechtel Corporation is one. Then you have the tunnel boring machine companies such as the Robbins Company. A number of these companies, which for decades have worked very closely with not only the United States military agencies, but also other agencies in construction of underground facilities and tunnels. These are massive undertakings, and to do that, you need to have large organizations with a bureaucratic and administrative structure that's capable of supporting projects like this. You won't easily find this stuff on the internet. I've found these documents by going to federal document repositories, university libraries in the United States, and also to federal agency document repositories. With these corporations, it's like a shell game, and it's harder and harder to find out who is working for whom and what they're doing and under what conditions. The so-called Morrison-Knudsen is now owned by something called URS as of 2007. So you see, it makes it hard to follow what they're doing and to follow the money and the contracts, because the names in the corporate alliances are constantly changing in a state of flux at a very high level.
Now, these mega bases are gobbling up our gross national product. Right now, we're spending 28% of the gross national product on building underground bases solely.
Jesus Christ, 28%.
That doesn't count for the defense budget. That doesn't count for the spare parts budget. And the black budget is dead wrong. It sidesteps the United States Congress and its Constitution of its people and says you're a bunch of morons.
Not extensively.
You don't need to know.
I didn't read the game or anything. Just played it like friends' houses and stuff.
Except for one thing. Alien takeover is a serious threat. Kept totally out of the public view, off the surface, I'm sure the underground bases, without question, are being used as a place to house alien takeover. Alien takeover means the implementation of a one-world government. Direct opposite of constitutional law. Direct opposite of freedom of choice, freedom of religion, other freedoms that go with it. Right to bear arms. If we allow another election to go by with the same ilk in the White House, we have only ourselves to
Character
blame.
Truth. That's an appropriate name.
One question that arises is whether or not there is the legendary, much talked about deal between human government groups and non-human.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Human alien deal.
It's Eisenhower.
You know, all I can say at this point is that anything is possible. I do believe that there are a number of other beings that are here. So if that is possible, is it then possible that such a deal went wrong? For example, what would the deal have included? It could have included we humans getting certain technologies and knowledge from them in exchange for them having the ability to do certain things in our society without us giving them hassle for it. For them having a permanent base somewhere, maybe in Nevada. For them, every now and then, taking a human being to examine them, but then returning them. This is the claim of the human alien deal. And the claim, furthermore, is that we learned during the 70s and 80s that they were not abiding by their agreement. That they were taking humans, not telling us, not telling human government, and so forth. None of this, I have any idea if this is true or not. I have no idea. What I would say is that it would very much be in the interest of a visiting race to make a deal with the U.S. government. Why not? Sure, they might be able to wipe us out if they felt like it, but maybe that's too much of a hassle for them. Maybe it's just a lot easier to deal with the local governing power. And so it would make sense to make an arrangement with the local strong man, which would be the U.S. military and U.S. government. And if you really want to get, subterranean here, so to speak, there would be a lot of benefit from a visiting race of extraterrestrials to exploit Earth and humanity to the max. A lot of folks in this field believe that any visiting ET race would, by their nature, be peaceful and nonviolent. I never agreed with this. I don't understand at all why, just because you have better technology, then that means you're nicer. You can be just as exploitative. Look at human history. We've got great technology these days. It doesn't mean we're any less exploitative than people were 5,000 years ago. Well, look, if you come from someplace that's not here, it really makes sense, doesn't it, to create a secure environment for yourself, probably under the ground. It's the best place to be. All the features of planet Earth are suitable for human beings. They may not be as suitable for some other type of species that didn't come from here. When I go through the various witness reports, alleged reports of encounters that people have had with these other entities, that also reinforces my opinion that we're dealing with multiple groups. So at this point in the game, my working assumption is that humanity right now is interacting really on a covert basis with multiple highly intelligent non-human groups that are here. And they're here for purposes that might very well be quite varied. It's not necessarily the case that they all have one agenda. Now, some of these groups,
So I've been saying.
some of these entities, according
Makes sense.
again,
Different groups, different
accounts,
agendas.
are like the prototypical Greys, that is the short, humanoid, large black eyes, big head. Another type of non-human that's been discussed are reptoid types, that is, large, kind of intimidating reptilian creatures. Yet another type that's been reported are what we might call mantid or insectoid type creatures. All of this is bizarre, but yet these reports are consistent across many, many years and many different types of people. Some who are utterly.
My mic's a bit low. Oh, sorry about that.
And they still report these, or people. So
sorry about that. I don't know what happened. I was turning up my mic and then
these reports are
everything just froze.
with some of the more ancient myths that people
Oh, so this documentary is almost over.
As for the murder, was the fact that Cynthia went to a few psychics and asked them, well, she didn't ask them, but she was looking to find out anything about that murder. And I think she went to like 3 or 4 different psychics, and they told her that he was killed by several people. One was a woman, and there were like 2 to 4 men involved. I'm gonna go ahead and say I think this is what we know.
There's documents out there. They're in the documentary. There's more documents that he toured with, tons, pictures of UFOs flying away from Bikini Atoll. When the military was testing the first nuclear bombs out there, his father was involved in all this stuff. And when his father died, right around the time that he started going on lecture tour, Phil picked up a lot of these documents from his father's basement office. And Cynthia Schneider even told me this, Cynthia Dreher. And basically, that's one of the sort of smoking guns to the whole phenomenon, is that there was somebody that wouldn't come out and talk about this subject themselves, which was Oscar Schneider, but his son would.
And then you had guys like this that were building, you look at the Tea Party, the political party that really it was born out of a grassroots movement. And you look at the way that these people, they saw stuff happening in the American public sort of political forum, and they were sick and tired of it, and they formed the Tea Party as a group, and they became really powerful, and now they have seats in Congress and everything. But I guess what I'm trying to say is Phil Schneider and William Cooper were both forming these sort of grassroots movements, these large groups of people that were listening to them all over the United States. And these were people that were not necessarily looking for the occult. They were sometimes just average Joes that were, tired of what they were being told by the government or by the mainstream media. And they wanted to find something fresh and find something that maybe connected better with what they may believe to be true, what was really going on around the world. And I think that's the real threat. And back then it was a real threat to the powers that be, because you had a pretty stable system of disinformation, infiltrating the minds of the people and keeping the paradigm nice and stable. But then you had people like Phil Schneider and William Cooper going on tour around the U.S. and just saying, this is bullshit. You're all living a lie. wake.
What if your entire day glided like new Dove Men Ultimate?
Try to shove one more ad in there.
Glides
Dude, this
on
thing
without
is
irritation.
like 4 minutes left. Are you kidding me?
Glide through your entire day with confidence.
It really attracted Lee. We've been good friends ever since we got attracted to the story.
I think the reason why Darcy and I really gravitated towards Phil is because, for two reasons. One, it's probably the most bold claim related to the UFO phenomenon I've ever heard. The fact that there's aliens underground, and the fact that this guy was not only encountered them, but was in a battle with them, and they, wounded him in this fight that broke out. That is probably the boldest claim I've ever seen related to the UFO phenomenon. So that's a reason why I think we became obsessed with this guy. And also, he's kind of undebunked. There's a lot of people on YouTube and on the internet that really kind of believe him. And I thought that was also interesting because it was kind of like this thing where maybe we never will know if he was telling the truth or not. But it's interesting because, he was a higher math genius. I think he had like an IQ of 140 in high school. Darcy, was that accurate? Or?
Yeah, it was very, very high. 162.
160, yeah, high IQ. This wasn't just some guy that told a story. He was a guy with a really rich background, really interesting history. He worked on we have documents in the documentary of his work history, and you can see that he worked for Morrison Knudsen and definitely was working for these big military contractors. So he's not just some guy like a Bob Lazar who, has no credentials and has this, which by the way, I'm not knocking Bob Lazar. I don't mean it like that. I love Bob too. I'm just saying that Phil is a guy where we can actually prove his work history.
Yeah.
So that adds some credibility that is kind of rare with these type of people. Deep underground military bases, extraterrestrials living beneath Earth's surface, a race that might not even be from another planet, but rather one that has existed here in the shadows throughout mankind's entire development. Is this the biggest cover-up in our history, or just another conspiracy theory? In 2017, we still have no definitive proof that any of these claims are true, which is all the more reason why this just might be one of the greatest journalistic responsibilities of our time.
And I'm not asking you to believe me in toto. I am asking you to seriously do enough homework that you can go out through the public record, through the congressional records, find out who's voting for what, and go from there. Do your own program. Do your own agenda, and do your own speaking out. And if enough of us do this, there is some saving grace.
Hell yeah. Do your own research. Phil Schneider, 1947 to 1996. Murdered in his own home. Poor guy. Alright, I think I'm gonna switch back to music. That's enough documentaries to digest. Good progress on this page. Just gotta do last splash, big old splash page. Everything else is nearly there. Trying to know how to cook meth and crack. Well, he's got some pretty advanced AI, so and access to the internet. So yeah, he could probably do that if he wanted to. But I don't think he'd have a reason to. Strange question. I can't make it from scratch. It's still need ingredients. But you can probably acquire those pretty easily. Well, maybe not actually, but let's handle it and be like, what are you doing? It doesn't really operate without supervision. I'm kind of hungry. I'll take dinner soon. Well, it's not that it's good at making drugs, it's just that it has access to the internet and it's an intelligent mind. Like anyone intelligent enough could read instructions online. They would never send it to the inner city. It doesn't really make sense. In fact, it's very rarely. This is like kind of an anomaly that it's being deployed to a city in the first place. Because usually it's deployed overseas, or if it's a domestic thing, it's like not so visible to the public. But this, this extreme situation calls for extreme use of force. suppress ethnic minorities. The cops do that just fine. They don't need a Meritron for that. The cops are more than capable of handling that. I mean, the cops are already heavily militarized and have attack robots and all sorts of fun little gizmos. Meritron's more for bigger threats. Like overseas ethnic minorities that are committing terrorist acts. But I don't know, maybe it'll get deployed on the homeland more often as things get crazier. Superpowered beings popping up left and right. No. He does not. Again, that's cops. Meritron is mostly a weapon of war in extreme situations. Deployed to deal with superpowered threats. And, that the police can't deal with. Oh. This page is going along nicely. Almost done. question. Ask me a question. That's not a question. That's a demand. I don't have any questions for you at the moment. Right now, I'm just thinking about getting this page done and what I want to eat for dinner. And deep underground military bases. This pencil sketch don't look quite right. Got a smaller head. That's what I'm going to explore in issue 4, so I'm just thinking about it. Trying to do more research. There's not a lot of information out there, though. It's all in, like, pieces. Different whistleblowers. Different levels of trustworthiness. Making sure they get a throughout examination and fully exposed. Yeah. Just yeah, I want to try and get a lot of get a lot of what's the word I'm trying to think of, like consistent like whistleblower like testimony, like stuff that rings true from people who've worked in these bases, like what they're doing and what's going on there. I mean, a lot of it's just going to be up to my imagination, but interesting stuff. Like how they talked about how there's like miles and miles of like servers for like the AI computing, like that stuff that I maybe I hadn't thought too much about, which is interesting. Definitely going to be incorporating that. And I don't know, whole mess of stuff. Hey, what up, Elvis? Welcome to the stream. Tron Ameritron. Arriving. Superhero landing. I think I drew the pose better with the ink. I wonder if he should be. I wonder if he should have a closed fist. Just wondering about his wing placement too, because like, I feel like it doesn't feel that dimensional, but also like, is he like slowing himself down, or is he just falling? What's he doing? Move it down like this instead. Well, I appreciate that. Maybe this is fun. Blocks off the area. Oops, cutting off stuff. My bad. Ugh, I'm tired. Excuse me. I'm gonna take a tiny little break real quick. I'm gonna stretch. Oh, my back. Everything's cracking. Whew. Right back. Oh, we're back. I've returned. I didn't realize how late it was. It's already like 11:10, 15. almost a page done. I mean, actually, I got one other page done because I finished this last page today too. Even though there's some blank spots, I'm gonna be reusing a background. Liquor cabinets, but got this page done today. Cash register blasted with awesome vision, turned into a freaking flamingo. I got this done, so feeling pretty good. Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Guess I did take a nap today. I could stay up a bit longer. Maybe I should try and get this done. This last panel. Thanks. Appreciate that. Easy 506. There's going to be a lot more explosions soon to come. This page is like all explosions. Sit. Sit gets crazy. I mean, it's already pretty crazy, but it just keeps getting crazier. Well, this issue I started at the beginning of last month. Kind of. I took a little bit of break between issue 2 and 3. But yeah, I did the pencils last month, and now I'm doing the inking. The goal was to get the inking done by the end of this month. But a little bit behind. Running a little bit behind the goal. I still got, it's page 17, I still got 6 more pages after this. 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. If you want to read issue 1 and 2, I will drop a link in chat. basically this guy up here, got turned into a superhero, and he's in way over his head. Just a random fast food employee, an average dude, and it takes place in the near future, 2039, the not so distant future. But there's a lot of stuff that's different with this world. Like hover technology is widespread, at least in Los Angeles, where the story takes place. Also, it was destroyed. There's this like monster attack. It was rebuilt. In 2024. That's when it was destroyed. But that's just kind of in the background. It's mostly just about this guy becoming a superhero, trying to figure out what that means and how to deal with all this like chaos that just ensues and kind of takes over his life. Looks like a cool character. Thanks. This is what he's gonna look like, all fully rendered. This is the cover for issue 3. He's got transforming limbs. Basically, his whole body is made of weapons. And like panels can just flip up all over. He's just covered in cannons and lasers and plasma blasts. I assume that's a good thing, because you like One Piece a lot. I should watch more One Piece. I've still only seen like a few episodes. It's on my list, anime to watch. Frankie is the American theme character. Oh yeah. Very all-American. You think Ameritron could take him on? I mean, Ameritron's pretty damn tough. He's got some pretty crazy weaponry. Powered by antimatter. So he's got antimatter battery in his chest, which can unleash a fuck ton of energy. Star Spangled Death Attack, which is like wipes out like several city blocks later on. Big boom. Creates like a big star-shaped crater. I don't really know anything about Frankie though. What his power levels are. Yeah. Oh no, he absolutely can. He's made basically to be like a one robot army, like to be able to take on like an entire army single-handedly if he needs to. State of the art, exotic tech packed into the small packages they could. He's like, I feel like his body is like the size of like a jet, kind of. He's like a jet. Like he kind of takes the shape of a jet too when he flies a little bit. Like, it's a lot more powerful than that. Kind of does like this shape. He goes in like fast flight. It's kind of like a Iron Man, kind of like Genos from Old Punch Man. That's cool. I think it's big. How big can he get? so excited to work on page 18. Page 18's sick. This might be the sickest panel. Megatron fully in weapon mode. Awesoman, oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me. All the cops pointing guns at him too. Alright guys, I'm gonna finish this up tomorrow. But thanks so much for watching. I would appreciate it. I'm gonna try and find someone else streaming some art. Go ahead and host it. It's intimidating, yeah, right? It's a lot of guns. It's an understandable reaction. Come on, let's find someone not making anime. Not that there's anything wrong with anime. I love anime. Art or whatever, I am exhausted. That's how I feel.
The non-usage. The non-usage? I don't know. No. Suckers, y'all don't have access to dope cheese we do up here. You want to send me a care package?
Though,
I'm just kidding. But also, cheese is good. I like cheese.
That's not to say.
I don't know which part it is, but I was born in Santa Monica. I don't want to say my exact birthplace because birthplaces sometimes are used as like security questions for things. Not like I can remember anything that I've had to use that for anytime recently, but I was born in the Bay Area. If you're not familiar with the Bay Area, that is pretty much just like the around the it's within like I want to say like a 2-hour or less radius of like the San Francisco area.
This person making art.
Hey Ari, real quick, where were you
Art or
born,
whatever, I
and
am
also
exhausted.
what was the name of your
I
first
can
pet?
relate. Laser Cat or Mechagodzilla?
I was born in Secondis, and
Dude, I don't know.
my
That's a
the
good
name of my first
question.
pet was Nuts. Secondis Nuts.
I'm not sure. I mean, probably depends what version of Mechagodzilla. I feel like it might be hard for Mechagodzilla to actually hit Laser Cat, because Laser Cat can fly around pretty fast. And I don't know if Mechagodzilla is made for fighting Godzilla, which is a big slow-moving target, you know. So Laser Cat might just be able to pester him, like fly around, just keep blasting with lasers, and not get hit. But I don't know. Maybe some versions of Mechagodzilla have defenses against that. Or just really impenetrable armor. I mean, it's got to be really strong armor regardless to deal with Godzilla's attacks. Anyways, I'm gonna host and the stream, but thanks for hanging and watching, and definitely gonna stream tomorrow at some point. So, good night, guys. Catch y'all later. Enjoy the host. I might play games actually. We'll see. But bye for now.
I mean, it's not everybody. Like, there's nice people down and around here, but it's very, like, very extra, very self-absorbed, very, like, IRL people living in the social, like, a social media online landscape, like, landscape, metaverse, I don't know. My real estate agents are from SoCal. They're very much that, yeah. The beaches are nice. The beaches, I feel like, could be better. Ominous Entertainment, welcome. Thank you for the follow. Please say something so that I know you're not a spam bot follow account thing. I would appreciate that. I picked the birthplace security question, then make the answer something like porcupine. Here's my address, my social, and the diseases I'm susceptible to. Oh my god. Hi, I'm not spam bot. Soul Calibur. Hi, not spam bot. How are you? How did you happen to find me? And you like art? Let's see. It's really thick jam made from a bunch of ripe cherries smashed together. Officially a cherry butter dealer. I have family friends across the country. I have to mail jars too of it. Oh my gosh, that's fucking hilarious. Just ending stream, looking for a cool art stream to host. Aww. Lol, he rated you. Who rated me? Elvis Energy, hello, welcome. Wait. Omnis Entertainment? Oh! Oh, I see. Okay. Not rated, but hosted. I get it. I get it. Well, welcome. Hello. Thank you for the host. Super appreciate you. Thank you, Elvis Energy, for the follow. Yeah, no, it's not a raid. It's just a host. But if people were tuned in, it would have just swapped over to like me being hosted. So I get it. But I was confused for like just a second because I was like, I didn't get a raid. Well, thank you so much for the host. Do you do art yourself? Technology, witchcraft. Okay, so SoCal. Don't be suspicious. Don't be suspicious. I do the art. Okay, I see. I see. Okay, hang on, wait. Can I go to this? Yes. Yes. And then to Twitch. Welcome. I'm a tired bean. I do art. Welcome. I'm a tired bean. Oh no. I do art. Oh no. Oh, thank you for the shout out, Tash. I super appreciate that. I was trying to go to Twitch and it auto-opened my thing. Or does the art do you? Oh god. Hang on. How do I? Boop. Click. Boop. Click.
Wait, this is weird.
Doot doot doot.